Front Analytics is a professional services and consulting company, professional services and coaching. So we help companies basically to solve their data science problems, and we also do training and coaching. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Alton Alexander, and I'll tell you from the beginning that I went to BYU, Idaho, and I graduated with a degree in engineering and mechanical engineering, mainly because that was the hardest program that they had at the school that I happened to be accepted to, because I got rejected from all the other schools I applied to because I flacked off in high school. And I was a troublemaker. But the thing is, I went right into a PhD program, because I knew that I wouldn't, be able to come back from industry. And the only reason I went to a PhD program was because when I started talking to people, they said that nobody gets a full ride scholarship unless they're a PhD student. And I said, okay, I'll be a PhD student for 3 years and I'm going to leave. And I didn't really actually, I don't know if I was, trying to con anybody, and I got caught up in it, but I did. I dropped out of a PhD program. And at the U in bioengineering and computer science, and nobody knew what data science was then. This was maybe only 12 years ago. And then I started working with Ben Taylor, who did the deep learning, and that was awesome. At I Am Flash, and I really cut my teeth there. They have tons of data and a fantastic company, but it ended up not being right for me just because I was on a trajectory where I was outgrowing my ability to be compensated there. And so I walked out on them and started my own stuff and started consulting. And so that's about 10 years ago now that I started consulting contract work. And you know what happens the first time you start consulting is, if you're any good, they want to hire you full time. And so being a first time consultant, not really knowing what I was doing, I was like, yeah, sure, it sounds like great. I got an awesome, pay boost. And that company went out of business. And then I tried doing my own startup for a little while and competed in data competitions, like there's competitions right now. I won a couple of them, which was fun. Got myself even more involved in the community, and I started presenting at things like this, right? And then I took another gig, and I started working, and this was kind of the big leagues, I guess you could say. It was agency work. And agency work is completely different from as an employee in-house, right? Because if you haven't been exposed to agency work, then you just don't know. But and I didn't know. And I walked in there, I was like, yeah, we can do this. But the exciting thing about agency work and why that worked well for me was because I have this consulting mentality, and it also exposed me to lots of business problems. And I got to work with high-profile companies like Cisco and Intel and Verizon, worked on global marketing campaigns, and got to interface with their C-suite and kind of fell in love with providing value to the VPs and the CTOs and the CEOs, because they are starved for analytical insights. And but eventually I just kind of got sick of it, and I got sick of everything, and I completely unplugged. And this is what I did last year. In fact, we lived out of our minivan, me, my wife, and our 3 children, for about 6 months. And we just traveled. And I think we drove about 30,000 miles. That's across the United States, at least 15 times-ish, yes. But we didn't really go across as much. We went up and down. So we did Banff, we did, of course, Yellowstone, we did all of Zion, and down south we went up and down Highway 1, and it was great to kind of unplug. In the meantime, though, I still was paying the bills. And what I would do is I would whip out my laptop in the Coleman, and I would work on client work, and I'd work on presentations, and I'd learn new technology and had a blast. And I'm sharing this just because I came back to reality, and I kind of regrouped with myself, and I said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my own agency, and I'm going to do consulting work. And it is hard. A lot harder than you think, because it's different to be an analyst than it is to be a business owner. And that's part of what I'm going to share today, and hopefully that's why you're here, is what are the 2 key things that you need in order to succeed in data science? And if anybody's in the wrong room, then I guess leave now, right? Like they say on the airplane, as if you didn't want to go to your destination, you can leave now. But so this is me. So I'm the president of a data science consulting company, and we have 6 employees, and we are doing fantastic. And we have some great clients, and we also, like I said, we do coaching, so we work with individuals who want to learn these skills. But that's enough about me. Let me just hear from you. I want to hear a couple of your challenges. You came to this talk, and I'm guessing you're not just waiting for the raffles, because it's not like they're that great prizes. You waited all day long, for these networking events and the social. Tell me what were you hoping to get? What are your challenges? And at least 4 of you have burning challenges that you need to know. So who's first? Yeah.
I'll just say greater exposure to other technologies and trying to keep up to date with kind of cutting edge tools.
Yeah, fantastic. Just being more aware of what's going on. Good. Who else wanted to get something out of today? Yeah.
I'm helping the old industry, and most of the loopholes are in this 11 by 7 PDF file, paper data, right? Especially with the data and do their work. Either it's going to paper or we're trying to build like that, right? But that industry can be felt in language. There is mapping and a whole bunch of other technologies. Right?
Yeah.
But that industry just doesn't have that mentality yet to embrace what can be done and can be upgraded for them. And so when the technology is mature, practice is there, it's just the industry itself and aged. All that. That's my challenge.
Yeah, so you're representing a very literal challenge right now that companies are facing, which is there's kind of the old guard and there's an old way of doing things, and things have worked, but there's also a recognition for, and maybe even a desire for understanding what the new technologies and opportunities are and where we can apply them.
Right. My challenge is not even the data sources for data effective. My challenge is not for all the practices. It's getting the user who can benefit from these to embrace it.
This is awesome. Okay, wow, you could have even said it better than I am going to say it. Okay, great. Hold that thought.
So I'm trying to use all of data organization. So I want to get a data technology.
Yeah.
That's also the data environment. We provide some data over the data meeting and all that stuff. So I want to get myself to data. That's what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. And yeah, understanding best practices with data pipelines, and then of course governance. And it's interesting that the governance aspect actually starts to lean a little bit more towards the user, like the user base, understanding the human element of the data problem. That's good. There was another one over here. Yeah, what do you looking to do?
So we have 15 different clients whose website we manage. And we're just looking for ways that we can better analyze the data from the e-commerce stores and be able to help them out.
Great.
Insights to what they can do better and stuff.
Awesome. So you have a very literal, a problem with data, and to better serve your clients' needs. What about over here?
For really small businesses, we're struggling with looking at our data and statistically sound like important. To figure out some way forward to say, okay, we've got these skills that make a difference. What's
Wait, elaborate a little bit more on why you can't afford it. What do you mean by afford?
Hire a full-time data scientist at $150,000 for bills. What seems to be the overly complicated, overly engineered.
Sure.
Warehouse. It feels like it should be simple.
Oh, sure. But can you afford to get it wrong? Maybe. Time will tell, I guess. What else can, what's your burning thing that you're trying to get out of today that, okay, then let's move on. So there's obviously challenges that we face in business and as individuals. And all of us are here for some different reasons. In the topic title, I said, what are the 2 elements you need to succeed? Of course, success is defined differently for different people. For me, success while I was living out of my van was different than maybe how I'm defining success now. And but I would say that it falls into one of these 3 things when it relates to business, and it is increased clarity to infer the essentials from an onslaught of data. And that represents an entire class of machine learning algorithms, right? And business processes. Second, to deliver actionable, to make a fundamental, succinct inference that matters. And that's like driving value, right? And then ultimately adding value. The numbers themselves aren't insight, tell the story. So when I look at these 3, while this is a very businessy, business terminology and salesy way of thinking about it, each one of these really literally represents algorithms underneath and methodologies that we use, or even technology to drive success individually and as companies. So let me give you my 2 things that you need to succeed. And those are technology and human behavior. You absolutely have to have these 2 fundamentals. And both as an individual and as a company. And so let's talk about some scenarios that either you might be in or your company might be in, or you may have seen in the past. So there on the left is a plot of technology along the x-axis, meaning if you have more advanced or more adoption of new technology, then you're further out there to the right. And then human behavior or human capital, do you have the people and the talent to be able to do it, but also do you have the business processes to make sure that it gets executed correctly? So when I step into a company, right, and when I'm working with people, what I see almost 90% of the time is I walk in there and they have immediately, I can tell, they've overinvested in technology. And you might be feeling that right now. You might be feeling like, wow, there are so many hotshots that stand in front of you on top of the stage that know everything, and I need to go study Udemy for like the next 24 years, right? And I need to go do Lynda and Coursera, and I've got to like sign up for the next greatest thing, and I've got to go install like XYZ, right? And even if you do that in an inkling, you are going to be over-investing quite rapidly in technology. And companies will do this because a hotshot will come in with, like a fancy new product, and they will say, hey, just buy this new server or install this new application, just buy a site license of Tableau and all your answers, everything's going to be solved. But what they don't tell you, and if you're not keenly aware, is you are just over-investing in technology without the appropriate human behavior. And that's what we were talking about here in telecom, right? And it's about adapting the right behaviors and educating the people, getting the right people in the right places and the right processes so that you can maximize the technology. So what should it look like is like this. And this is what we try to do. Not necessarily the right technology for the right problem, but I'm trying to illustrate that we adapt the right amount of technology and enable the people and the processes so that they have the scalable success, okay? So that's it, really. I mean, those are the 2 things that you need to succeed. Wow. And so we could be done here, right? I mean, but I don't think that's it. I think that you came to here, and I wanted to come to share a little bit more about my unique perspective, and hopefully to help round out the rest of today, because I think that reminding myself of where I was, even just a few years ago, like I probably never thought I'd be standing on the stage or running my own consulting company, or like, taking down corporate deals for $250,000 plus. And it's all doable when you scale technology and human behavior appropriately, both as an individual and as a company. So first, let me tell you about our process, and then I want to, in a general sense, and then I want to talk specifics about some of the work that we're doing. So our process as a consulting company really involves 4 circles. And we do this especially in our coaching, right? So when we work with individuals, we have a coaching program called Embark. We also do this with companies to make sure that they have, everything that they need to scale. And that includes mentorship, technology, implementation tracks, and skills training. And I think that I would have thought that I needed a lot more skills training than anything else. I probably overemphasized that in the past. Certainly higher ed tries to encourage you that you just need more training, but it's definitely a balance, right? You need the appropriate exposure to the technology environment. You need those tools, right? And then also the track, which tells you how to get from where you're at to where you're going, and then the mentor to really hold you accountable. And if you're lucky enough to be working at a great company, then you have all these, right? And you're not lacking any resources to be able to move forward. But if you're not, then maybe we should talk, because that's part of what we do. So when we do step into a company, and albeit maybe they have overinvested in technology, but that's part of. It's just faster to scale that, right? But what they do need, and kind of the data environment 2.0, or of today, looks like this. You have an analytics sandbox, and that sandbox, we're going to go into details, but it's usually a largish machine that you can deploy models to, or you can run jobs on. I'm not talking about your laptop, right? It's an external location, usually in the cloud, and the whole block here represents maybe AWS built on top of S3 as your data lake or your data lake. But S3 could also be your data store, so number 3, HDFS or S3. And this might be total review, but this is important. So you'll have a sandbox, and then you'll also have at least one cluster, or the ability to deploy clusters or to turn on clusters. And that's really where you can run Hadoop and your distributed compute environment. And this is extremely powerful, because in today's technical landscape, where there's a proliferation of open source technologies, we also have the beauty to be able to scale independently our data storage from our compute, right? And whereas maybe a decade ago you would go buy an Oracle cluster, an Oracle rack, and you would be kind of a servant to whatever resources and size of that rack, right? Whereas now we can load as much data as we want into our distributed compute into S3, and then we can bring the compute resources, or we can rent them, right, with EMR, and I'll show you that. And if you have, if you have this mental picture, then you're going a long ways, right? So what is the sandbox? This is the analytical sandbox is your this one big machine, right? And the big machine could be many things, But in modern day today, I mean, in most businesses today, I see them installing these core components, including Jupyter Hub for all you Python users, R Studio for you like me, the diehard R users, or SaaS if you're into proprietary, and maybe even MATLAB, but not so often. Not with open source tools like they are now. And Zeppelin, although I don't see a lot of adoption from Zeppelin, but some people really like it, especially if you're a Scala programmer. And then on this sandbox, you're probably going to have Tableau server, right? Or some other BI tool, whatever, Pentaho or whatever you're. And maybe you have multiple different boxes for these different applications, right? Depending on the size of your company, but you can imagine just putting it all there. And the power of this is it gives you one central place for R&D from an analytics perspective, right? We're talking about big data analytics, not necessarily just BI and reporting, but this definitely becomes the front-facing entry point for, little analytics and big data analytics. So, as an individual, why does this matter? This matters because you should probably invest your time and your skills into better understanding these tools. These are kind of foundational, fundamental, right? This is the access layer. But furthermore, we still have on the right there the Hadoop cluster, right? And we're still talking completely about the technology side, but the Hadoop cluster can be simplified in a few different ways. And one is a service that we've used in the past called Kubel. And Kubel is fantastic because they make it wicked easy to spin up a cluster as a service. Boom, you just drop in there and now you can start working with it. I personally really like EMR, and EMR is fantastic because you can just pay for what you use and you spin that up, and basically you can turn on a cluster, follow a few tutorials, upload some data, and away you go. You're analyzing data, doing some MapReduce job. So how do you get started in this? Is this old? I mean, how many of you use EMR, or how many of you, just by show of hands, use Hadoop? Yeah, okay, that's kind of what I thought. Okay, and how many of you want to use Hadoop or Spark? Yeah, another few of you. How many of you, well, what would you use if you don't use Hadoop or Spark? Well, you're going to use the rest of these tools, right, as an analyst? So maybe by show of hands, how many of you use one or more of these tools on this screen? Just make sure we have the right audience. Okay, good. Thanks for making sure everybody's awake. So good. So we're in the right technology space, right? Okay. Okay. So if you're using these tools, or you're coming to the conference and you want to understand how to better leverage them, and you want to, you kind of already have this gut sense, like, wow, I'm overwhelmed. Like, what do I learn first? How do I add the most value come Monday morning when I'm back at work, or, the rest of this weekend as I'm perusing the job board, how do I get to that next level? And how do I contribute the most value? And one of the things you're going to hit up against is, how do I get started? And how the heck can I afford something like this? And even as a company, right? A company recognizes that there's an opportunity to get started in this new analytics space. And one option is to just provision these servers and these resources. And I'm suggesting that at a minimum, their sandbox is going to look something like 8 cores and 61 gigs of RAM. And it's going to cost roughly 60 cents an hour, not bad, but maybe $500 a month if you leave it running 100% of the time. And then to get started with a cluster, they're going to turn on a master node at about $300 a month and 2 slave nodes with maybe 4 cores, and this would be tiny. This is like just getting started, right? And so all in, baseline, their price is maybe $781 just to get that set up and started, like just to leave it running. But again, it's wicked easy to turn on technology, right? And we could go, I could show you this. We could go spin up this new technology right now. But what's going to happen is now you've turned on the technology. We gotta learn how to use it. We gotta learn how to maximize it. And we have to implement those behaviors and train ourselves or our employees, right? Now, if we really want to get going, this is actually an old example, but if you want to turn on and actually do some big data on a terabyte of RAM and leave that on all the time, yeah, we're talking like $19,000, but that's only $27 an hour, to move some data, which companies do now all the time. Say we want to turn this on for the day, and I want to process some sweet, churn model, or you can put a lot of data in a terabyte of RAM, and you can follow a tutorial, and by tonight you could probably be clustering your. This is a lot of data. Let me think of an example. Probably all of terabyte. Wow. You could probably take in all the transactions for the last 3 years that a smallish retail shop has had, like a Gap, easily in a terabyte or a terabyte and a half. Okay, so then when do the skills come into play? So in this particular example, well, what if you want to save money? I'm telling you that we can save money by not having it on all the time, maybe just run it for the day, or we could turn it on with spot instances and only pay for, on a bid perspective, and we turn on these resources, but we pay a fraction of the retail price because we're okay if it gets shut down. And there's ways to manage that so that we can keep our costs lower, effectively keeping it at only $5,000 a month instead of $13,000, a savings of $13,000. And while these numbers are high as an individual, if you're thinking, wow, how do I get started in this? A company wouldn't bat their eyes at this, right? This is just part of OpEx to keep the lights on. And this is where they hire us too, because if we can save them even before we provide any value, and we can save them, close to $10,000, then of course, why wouldn't they move forward? Okay, so what I want to say is, I want to take just a second right here and say, that's all fine, even to understand on a theoretical level. But for those of you who aren't doing Hadoop yet, but raised your hand and said that you're interested in Hadoop and Spark, or you're interested in big data, where do you get started? I would suggest that you sign up for the transportation challenge, right? That you come to the meetup groups, that you encourage your employer or you find a project there, or you come and talk to us. So Front Analytics, this is just our, hopefully you don't mind, just a quick plug to Embark, where what we do is we have a corporate and a personal plan, an individual plan, where companies can sign up and they can get started in analytics for less than the cost of running the server themselves, or as individuals, you can sign up and you can get that mentorship and the skills training and the accountability, as well as access to the exact same environment that I just showed for a fraction of the price, because we're on together. Okay, that's kind of my quick shameless plug. But the other thing is, the other thing is that you're here, right? I mean, you came and you're leaning in, you're finding out what, and keeping your eyes and ears out for what new technologies there are. But I also would tell you that nothing gets done except when you're sitting behind a computer and you're doing it, or you're working with the people and you find a team, right? And you just make it happen. You're going to have to pound through it. And, or as a company, right, you're going to have to find the resources and do it, and so so this is kind of step 2, I guess. So that's great. Go to Udemy or go to Coursera, or even, join Embark and where's it going to get you? Probably not very far if all you're doing is just consuming, right? And what you need to do is just have that self-awareness, and then you need to just commit to like, okay, now that I know the direction I need to go, now that I know that there is a ton of technology that I can consume, but instead I'm going to just dial it back and I'm going to focus on where I'm at and where I need to go. What's the problem at hand, and what's the like realistic solution that I can implement this week, and show success. You just do it, right? And it's going to take a hacker behavior, right? Because it's not like there's a tutorial that says how to get from A to B. Most of the time. Odds are actually there might be a tutorial. It's just going to take finding that one, because in reality there might be a Udemy course, and then you just have to follow it through. But how do you know? And then it's going to take the grit to persevere, to flourish, to succeed, and to like cross the finish line. How many of you are going to dabble in a new technology? Probably all of you. You probably all started like looking at something cool tonight. You're probably like, wow, deep learning, that's going to be awesome. Right? That's going to like change the future of the next 10 years. But how many of you are going to like pull it up and actually do anything? Yeah. But the self-awareness too, that maybe that's not me, but maybe I can still be, number one, I can be on stage for what I am, and I can provide the value that my company needs, or, who I am, and then the aversion to all of the distractions, right? And the aversion to, wow, that's a shiny new tool, or wow, the salesman just showed me something really cool that I can do. Why don't we just go buy that, Because it's easy to write a check. Yeah. Okay, so I promised that I was going to talk a little bit more about some examples of work that we're doing. But before I get into exactly what work I do, and I wanted to see if there was any questions. Maybe a burning question at this point, like, wow, why am I still in this room? Which is totally fine, and you can leave, I wouldn't care. Any questions? Otherwise, who has the first question about my clients or about the type of analysis I do?
Yeah. So I guess back to your point about shiny. There's always going to have to be side effects, right? Whenever you're tackling something, and it's not always going to be right on point. Do you have any sort of ways to say, I just need to cut my losses because this is going nowhere?
Yeah, good question. And I think there's two ways that you can answer where do you cut your losses, right? And I'll answer that question with one of my first experiences. So like I said, my favorite spot to be, and probably where I'm going to work the rest of my life, unless I run out of money, is with, or I run out of the ability, is with CEOs and CTOs, CIOs. And when I sit, and I'm a young guy, right, and I probably don't know half of what they know, certainly about their industry. But when I sit with the executive suite, and we're talking and looking and assessing their resources and where they're spending and allocating on new things, it is interesting to see that even at that level, a corporate level, they're doing what we're talking about on an individual level. And they are dead set and focused on the bread and butter of their business and the slow, almost painfully archaic technology, but that like generates value, you know, like clockwork. You know, what moves billion-dollar companies forward? It is pushing paper, and it's like so painful, right? But smart companies are investing probably 20% on just the fringes, you know, and they're looking at deep learning, and they're looking at, you know, transcription tools or you know, cutting edge things, and they've got, you know, special project teams over here, yeah, because they need to stay alert, right? And I think that's why we came here, is because we want to just be aware of, even close to home, like what's hot and what's trending, what's working for other people, you know, and is that something that could work for me? Or are there people or opportunities that are maybe more right for me right now? And how do you know unless you do dabble, right? So you do have to be kind of like one eye, you know, looking at the opportunity. But I guess what I'm referring to is that if you find yourself in a spot where you're distracted by a shiny new thing and you get it going and you know, it's easy to go and install and get set up, go 20% of the way and feel like you're creating value. And then you hop over to the next thing and you're like, wow, this is cool. So I just did Spark last weekend, and then this weekend I'm doing, you know, Flink, and then the next weekend I'm going to do Couchbase, or, you know, whatever route you're down. You know, that's great, but to really like drive it home and to, you know, to truly create value, it's going to take more than just dabbling, you know, and maybe that's a little bit of that is your own self-aware and just knowing who, you know, how deep can you go before you're able to emerge and provide that value, or how willing are you to let go of your core bread and butter that, you know, like the corporation that steadily drives $1 billion in value. But I would say stick to the basics. Like, yeah, good question. Okay, what other questions are there? And then I'll get a little more specific to my work, my tell-all, since I'm clearly on one. Do you have a question about what I do, or anybody? Okay. So let me tell you one more thing. So I told you already that I spend a lot of time in our studio. That's where I work best. I'm not as much of a Python user. I see a lot of value in Python if you're new, and I think that that's worthy to consider. And so I'm not going to try to sway you or anything. But I only bring that up because data, you know, here we are at a local big data conference, but I also just want to remind everyone that you can get a lot, and I mean a lot of mileage in memory, you know, using RAM. Especially since you can spin up a cluster that is equivalent to a 1.5 terabytes of RAM. You know, this may be distributed, but and have different kind of performance results. But you can also get pretty far on a single machine. It might cost you, you know, $60 an hour to rent it, but you can load your entire data set on one machine. And I bring that up because I work with clients sometimes who they'll bring us in and they'll say, oh yeah, because they want the shiny thing, you know, and they're like, well, you know, what's our opportunity here? And that's fine, and we'll come in and we'll help them assess that technology, but we'll also help them focus on the business problem and, you know, the value that they need provided. And many times it can be solved pretty straightforward just using human manpower, just thinking about the problem and not necessarily a fancy technology, right? And a perfect example is, so recently we were working with someone who, a major corporation who sells products to consumers, and they do that both online as well as over the phone, okay? And so like many companies, right, they've got a funnel where they drive people to their website or to the phone lines, and then they can convert them on the phone. And when a phone call comes in, they are so good about keeping track of what the phone number that they dialed and where that phone number was displayed. If it was displayed on one of their websites, maybe on the homepage, or if it was displayed really deep, or if it was displayed on some marketing, and so forth. And they had that nailed down, right? And as a major corporation, they even had probably 300 people focused on that side, right? But what's interesting is the system that they had, that the telephone agents were using, was over here. And they had a whole nother operations team to keep track of exactly what was typed in, what the order looked like, what product the customer wanted, how much they paid, if they didn't buy, why they didn't buy, and everything else. But what was crazy, and there was probably another 200 or 300 people just on that side alone. And what was crazy is because I come in on the C level, and they're able to kind of let down their guard, which is why I'm not going to say who it is or anything. And in fact, I've changed a lot of the details. But the thing is that their constant problem was that they were getting reports over here that would conflict with reports over here, and it was never like a holistic view. And so what we did in the most simple sense is we just took their data from that side and from this side, and we tried joining it. And you know what happened? Is that only like 20% of the data overlapped. Like there was only a key in their own personal systems, they could only map from one side of the house to the other 20% of the time. And so that meant there was no way to say this marketing activity over here drove this many conversions, let alone like this activity over here drove this kind of conversion rate, right? Because at 20%, the odds of picking up on a systematic bias was insane. And so maybe 10 more minutes. So that said, like, were they screwed? No, but they just didn't have anybody to come in there and help them recognize that that was the problem. And so in this case, it was just a matter of stochastic joins. And if you've never seen or heard of stochastic joins, basically all you do is if you're doing a regular join, then you just take the IDs here and the IDs here and you just map them. And there's a case for one-to-one and there's a case of one-to-many. But a stochastic join basically says take all the information from this record and everything over here, and let's create a distance score. And let's say which, so maybe this one's Alton Alexander and it has my phone number and then it has my address. But over here it has my wife and my phone number and then the address. And so the IDs are different, but because the phone numbers are the same, for this application, we could say that it was the same household. It was the same joint, right? And we can create a distance measure that says, these are close in the space of people or whatever that space is. Whereas it would be really far from, my name and my phone number would be really far from anybody in here. So therefore, my record would never be joined with one of yours. And that simple algorithm, we ran a proof of concept in Spark, and it worked fantastic. And boom, we got the join, and we got it from somewhere around 20-25% up to 75% using kind of just like some basic joins. Yeah.
That sounds like a data problem. You're not using the right data. So do you find out what the data problem when you go there, or
yeah, great.
data is detail that you have to like the feedback on?
Yes, good question. So you bring up a really good point that you say that sounds like a data integrity problem. It sounds like a data problem. And there's the thing is that they didn't recognize that that was the problem, right? And that's not even why they brought us in. They brought us in to optimize their sales, right? They brought us in to build a model that would say, if you do X, Y, Z, you're going to get higher sales. And in doing so, with only 20% of the join, were we still able to show a lift? Yeah, we could. So we continued the engagement. But we were able to show additional lift, not just by improving the model and showing them what they could do to change, but we also showed them by fixing this data integrity issue that it unlocked like immense other opportunities, right? And that's kind of the space that I like playing in, right? Because the C-suite, they probably know. I mean, they know how to drive $1 billion in value and like keep the course steady, but there's oftentimes a gap from the lower. So that's an example of what we do and how we provide value, and how it's not necessarily that fantastic. I mean, other than that, what we didn't do is we didn't come in and just say, oh, what you really need is to invest in technology even more, right? Nor did we come in and say, wow, you don't have enough people, because you already had like 300 people on both ends, right? But instead, we took their people, we took their technologies, and we literally like took this project up that scale, and have since done technology transfer and and helped to really level up everybody. And that's an example at the corporate level, and I could go on probably, but maybe that's a good wrapping up point. What, unless there's another last burning question, then I will, if not, let me drum up one really good story. Oh, hey, you have one?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not like, there's a problem you're hired to look at, and there's the problems you kind of uncover on the way. And then the problems you actually qualify to deal with.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there are going to be some where you're just like, something too domain specific, or just outside your experience, right? How do you talk to a CEO, try to keep the marketing to a minimum, like, don't someone bill of goods when you don't know how to do a particular thing, but still, make the sale so that you can solve the things you are.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a good balance. Yeah, how do you come in and you convince somebody to do a project and work on that project, but also get paid for the value that you're providing over here, but also, and almost vice versa, recognize that there's value over here, but that they're willing to pay for this. That's why I like consulting. I like contract work. I like project work because there's like a finish line, and there's like, they saw value in the beginning when they brought me on, or brought our company on, and we'll absolutely execute on that. But we also want them to succeed as our client, and we want to grow their account. And hopefully that's how many of you approach your own work too, right? And as you look to your employer, how do I invest in myself so that I can make my current or my future employer appreciate my value? And it's like a give back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's just, how do you get, some of the C-suite is not always receptive to being told, you think your problem is here, but it's really over there.
Oh yeah, then don't work for them, right? No, work for comfort people. No, yeah, that's tricky. You show them the data, right? I mean, we're analysts. Yeah, show them the data. So let me just wrap up real quick with that this has been a fantastic day. This has been probably one of the best conferences I've ever been to, and certainly one of the better ones. And I think we have people to thank, like Nick Bagley, and many others who are in the backgrounds. And what I want to say is that, this may be your very first time coming to this event, or you may have been here many times. You may have already presented. But I want you to know that as you look in your own life for ways to succeed in data and analytics, that you look for opportunities to scalable technology and your personal, as a company and as an individual, scale your personal talents and skills, and there are plenty of opportunities. Make it a goal to come out here and be the one to present. Like, what is the solution that you guys found for your e-commerce companies, right? Or what worked for your company? And that's only going to facilitate the community more. We have on our calendar here, if you go to frontanalytics.com/embark, a list of the community events as well as the premium events for those who subscribe to our Embark program. And even next week, I just wanted to point out that this is a paid event for people who are in Embark, but we have Analyze Utah at noon on Tuesday, where we're going to be getting hands-on working on the technology competition, right? The one that you may be thinking would be great for your career or great for networking. Well, we're going to be doing it at noon. And there's no excuses. You don't have to come to my downtown office. You can use the link to sign up for the webinar and watch it. Also, and we're going to be doing some data scraping and just pulling together the data sets. And then at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, there's a free event where the room behind us, the one that you're missing, I think, oh no, it was the hour before. Juwanza is going to be presenting on Apache Spark and Elasticsearch. So you're welcome to come to that, where we're going to be providing refreshments, I think, at 7. And then there's other events too, where maybe if you're just barely getting started and this is absolutely new to you and you kind of have, maybe you're just very, very fresh, and you haven't even decided yet if you're going to do Python or R, I would suggest, well, maybe you should just dabble with R. Or if you haven't seen it in a while, come to our workshop. The workshop is only $140, and we give you 2 days of intense training, hands-on, no fluff. You're going to be generating reports for executives by the end of these 2 sessions, or I'll give you all your money back. And so my last, I had a few selfless plugs, sorry about that, but my last thing for you is you guys have been great, and I think we have a great community here, and there are opportunities to get involved and to really invest in yourselves and to make that difference for who we work for and who we are. And there's really no excuses. And but definitely don't get caught up in the trap of, wow, there's just so much technology and so much to learn. It's still going to take getting out there and doing it and be comfortable with taking small steps, right? There's value in that. So thank you very much. That's my talk for today.
And we should move over quickly to get it out for a while.
Oh, sorry.
That's great.
Yeah, it's Saturday.